let me give you some very quick background on Columbia, which is what we're starting with. When I was a boy growing up in Brooklyn, New York, my mother's dream was that I would be the first. I'm the oldest of the four siblings, and my mother's dream was that I would be the first generation to go to college. Mom and dad never had gone to college. Their parents immigrated from Russia, Poland. They never went to college. And the dream was that I'm going to go to Brooklyn College. And then my mom started having higher thoughts. And in high school, she said, you know what, David? My English name. You know what, David? If you study hard and you work hard, I think you'll be able to get into Yeshiva University. That was her dream. That not only Brooklyn College, but Yeshiva University. And by my junior year, I started aspiring for Columbia. And Baruch Hashem, I got into Columbia. Columbia University has an extraordinary history of anti-Semitism, more than any other university or college in America. You see, their problem for them, and therefore for us, is that of the 8 Ivy League schools, they had the misfortune of being in New York, the center of where Jews live. So although Jews applied to Harvard and Yale and Brown and Dartmouth and Princeton and the one or two Penn and whatever I'm leaving out, Cornell, Jews naturally went for Columbia. It was in New York. There are all kinds of reasons that I chose Columbia rather than going for Harvard and Yale and all of those in the end, greatly because our family was in New York and I had responsibilities to my mother at home. So Columbia was concerned they had too many Jews and that they might lose their status and standing in the Ivy League for having too high a Jewish population. So they instituted numerous clauses, that's what they had in Germany, quotas. Long before affirmative action that ostensibly was meant to bring people in, blacks, Hispanics, this was a quota to keep Jews out. And they kept Jews out. It was very well known. And in New York, to get into Columbia for a Jew, that was a big thing. And for an Orthodox Jew with a kippah, that was a big, big thing. So I went to Columbia, and I learned on the side about the history of its anti-Semitism. In the 1930s, their most famous university president, Nicholas Murray Butler, was close with the Nazis. He invited Germans to speak, German professors to speak at Columbia. And when people were boycotting Germany, he refused. He traveled to Hitler. He brought Germans to speak on campus until it was just impossible for him to continue doing so without ending up being accused of, not by Jews, but by America, of being a traitor. He was vicious anti-Semite. And the center building at Columbia, where all their administrative offices, it's known as Butler Library in his memory. Place is anti-Semitic. There's a guy out here in Irvine, and I'm not allowed to mention his name. He's been a member of my shul for years. He's not well known within the shul. You know, there are some people that join the shul and they don't go to the davening per se. And he's a genius in his field, some crazy scientific field. He once gave me 2 of his papers to read. He said, "You're the only one out here who would understand what I have to write." And I sat down one Shabbat and I started reading one of his papers. I couldn't figure out what he's talking about. And he said, "So what did you think?" I said to him, "I never read anything like that in my life." Thank God he didn't follow up and say, "Well, what do you think of my thesis?" Why do I mention him? He has the most goyish name you could imagine. I thought he was a goy when he first joined the shul, because I never met even an assembly Jew with a name like that. First name, middle name, last name. Just complete goy name. And I said to him, you know, I just want, now that we started becoming closer, you know, I don't have any any self-control. I don't have boundaries. I'm famous for that. So please don't be offended. You have quite a Goyish name, if I must say. I've never heard of a Jew with a name like yours. He said, you know why? It's on purpose. I changed my name a few months before I applied for a position at Columbia because I knew they never would hire me if they knew my real name. And he told me his real name, and was that a Yiddish name? And he changed it to a name that sounded like a German Nazi, and he got hired. And he was able to stay until he chose to retire. He never told anyone his real name, and he's never told anyone out here his real name. And he made me promise that after he told me, I never would tell it to anyone else, and I never did. Viciously anti. So one of the things is the term alma mater. An alma mater is a mother of learning. That's what it actually means. Latin for mother mater of learning, alma mater of wisdom, something like that. So they have a fascinating statue that's rather famous right in front of Butler Library. And many universities do not have a statue of alma mater, but the school song is called the alma mater. And Columbia has their school song. And unless you've gone to Notre Dame with the Fighting Irish, most people have no idea what the school song is. And I heard it only the first time when I graduated college. So we were there at college. I sat with some of my friends. We all stood up for the alma mater. And I want to relive that moment with you as we begin. Today we're going to talk about Columbia. In the past week, they had a riot again, an anti-Semitic riot. And this time, a new president, new values, and the empire finally strikes back. But first of all, the alma mater. Thank you for being here. As always, graduation, they didn't save it from my year, but this is from another year. You're at the graduation. All the different schools, they have a separate day of graduation for each school, like the college, the law school, the med school, the engineering school, Barnard, the women's school. But the special day is when everyone from all the schools participates at the graduation. And this one is from apparently 2013. And it's similar to what I experienced that day. So Columbia graduation. Now, this is a song that comes out of classical music, actually, but after the 1930s, it was abandoned everywhere but Columbia. Maybe you've heard this melody before. If you're not sure where you've heard it, let's give this a try. '36 Olympics in Munich. Notice the arm. Okay? Okay, so for all the nonsense about Elon Musk or Steve Bannon, this is a much better version if you want to know what it really looks like.
Some breaking news in Upper Manhattan, a tense police presence right now after protesters took over a building at Barnard College. They were protesting the expulsion of pro-Palestinian protesters from the college. Eyewitness News reporter Josh Einiger on the campus with the breaking news for us. What's the latest, Josh?
Well, Bill, it's been a tense and rain-soaked hour or so here on Broadway. You could see a long line of police officers right now in the middle of Broadway trying to prevent people from re-entering the Barnard buildings where they had been staging this protest. We could take you inside a little while ago. This was inside a building called Milstein Center. It's the library, sort of a student center on the campus of Barnard, where a group of pro-Palestinian protesters had entered and had taken over the place. They are demanding, as you say, Bill, that two students be restored as students here at Barnard. These are students who were expelled after themselves entering a course in modern Israeli history back in January in a way that the school deemed was inappropriate, and it ended up expelling two of those students. That has led to a series of protests and sit-ins over the last couple of weeks here on the campus of Barnard, and that all culminated today when they took over the Milstein Library. After that, there was a bomb scare that was called in, and so the NYPD then came in. The bomb squad, we are told, still sweeping some buildings on the Barnard campus, and in the process of clearing those buildings, as many as 10, some number as many as 10 protesters who were on campus, we are told, were placed under arrest. We are still waiting for the firm numbers on that situation. But as we come back now to a live picture right now in the driving rain, there was, until just a few minutes ago, a bunch of protesters right here, sort of alongside where I am.
Thank you.
Breaking news right now, pro-Palestinian demonstrators are once again occupying a building on the Barnard College campus.
The students oppose Barnard's decision to expel two students who police sources say distributed hateful flyers during a class about Israel. Ali Bauman is live just off the campus in Morningside Heights with the latest. Ali.
Dick and Jessica, NYPD officers just entered the gated campus minutes ago. I'll give you a live look behind us here, behind those gates where they're now trying to clear the protesters out of Milstein Hall, off of the campus. They say they're trying to clear out after a reported bomb threat. Now, protesters had been occupying Barnard's Milstein Center, who wanted the college to overturn expulsion of two students who police sources said distributed hateful flyers during a class about Israel. Today's demonstration comes 1 week after protesters staged a similar sit-in at this student center against the expulsions. That day, authorities say a 41-year-old school security guard was hospitalized after being pushed and shoved by protesters entering the building. In a statement this afternoon, Barnard College administration said when mass disruptors first entered Milstein, the classes on campus were taking place, facilities were cleaning classrooms, and dining staff were preparing for meals. Campus activities, they say, outside of Milstein have been proceeding as normal. Now, today's protest also comes after President Trump yesterday posted on social media threatening to stop federal funding for any college that allows what he calls, quote, illegal protests, a vague and undefined term. Now, back out here live, I don't know if you can hear it behind me, but police are trying to clear us out of the way here. They have this whole avenue here, Broadway, sectioned off New York.
A tense situation tonight at Barnard College in Upper Manhattan between New York cops and pro-Palestinian protesters. It is now over, but not before at least 9 arrests tonight. Arrests of people protesting the expulsion of some students. And the pressure is on. President Trump threatening last night that colleges allowing illegal protests could lose their federal funding. At Barnard College tonight for us, here's Josh Einiger.
Tensions boiled over at Barnard College this evening. Police in the driving rain driving out an encampment of protesters after a bomb threat against the building they'd occupied this afternoon. But they wouldn't leave, and so arrests and anger at one of America's premier institutions of higher education.
We will not stop, we will not rest this club.
Barnard College, the affiliate of Columbia across the street, has been besieged by protests for weeks after the school expelled 2 students it says invaded a modern Israel history class, handing out flyers containing anti-Semitic imagery. And that led to demands for their reinstatement. Last week, a group took over a classroom building, and today it was the school's library, where college officials pleaded with protesters to talk.
We've asked you to please identify yourselves and leave now.
Only to be drowned out, in many cases, by masked anonymous demonstrators. Even the college president got on the phone with them, but the call went nowhere.
Dean Greenwich and I are happy to meet tomorrow or Friday morning with 3 unmasked representatives of your group who are Barnard students, and we can talk about this issue and others.
Our demand is to reinstate the expelled students because of how unjust this process has been, and we don't intend on leaving until that happens.
In a statement tonight, the school suggested patience is wearing thin. Our academic mission is at the heart of what we do, it said, and disruptions to that mission are an affront to the purpose of higher education and cannot be tolerated. In the end, police determined news.
President Trump with a warning for people involved in college protests over the conflict between Israel and Hamas, calling those protests illegal. He's saying he will stop all federal funding to the schools, even threatening to arrest or deport those involved. And the president's warning coming just days after a college employee was hurt when pro-Palestinian protesters tried to get into a building at Barnard College in New York. So let's bring in NewsNation's Rich McHugh, who is live with the very latest. And Rich, the First Amendment protects campus protests, correct?
It does, Nicole. It allows for free speech. The question arises about civil disobedience and how, breaking the law, that's where the rubber meets the road, as it did with Columbia University. So the president is essentially threatening funding from all these universities, any college that allows what he's calling illegal protesting on campus.
I told Linda, I hope you do a great job and put yourself out of a job. I want her to put herself out of a job. Education department.
Okay, that was about a month ago. President Trump trying to overhaul the Education Department, DOE. The Senate's confirming Linda McMahon as its secretary. The former WWE executive served in Trump's first term. She shares his vision of empowering states to take the lead on the education system. So she moves from small business to education this time.
Columbia University is finally taking disciplinary action after anti-Israel protesters took over the campus nearly 1 year ago. Alexis McAdams is live with their punishments. What do you know, Alexis?
Hey, Dana. Well, last time I was standing in front of Hamilton Hall here on Columbia University's campus, it was months ago. And when I looked behind me, I saw masked protesters breaking into that glass and going in there, saying they weren't going to leave the campus until the university completely divested from Israel. Well, it only took nearly a year, Dana, but now those student protesters finally facing disciplinary action. Watch. That was just some of what we saw. Now Barnard College, which is part of Columbia University, has expelled 1 student and suspended another for being part of that violent takeover. Back in April, mass protesters smashed the windows and destroyed everything they could get their hands on inside that school on the Ivy League campus. The punishment comes just days after Barnard kicked out 2 students for disrupting a history of Israel class in January. They threw around all these anti-Semitic flyers. Now the Department of Justice will visit 10 campuses dealing with anti-Semitic protests.
That's not free speech. These are criminals harassing and tormenting Jewish Americans. That's going to stop. If the district attorneys don't do it, the U.S. Attorney's Office will file hate crime charges.
So President Trump's threatening to imprison agitators. He posted this on Truth Social this morning. All federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No mask. So back out here live, it's a much different response from this administration, so we'll keep an eye on it. Dana.
Alexis, thank you so much.
We have breaking news. The Trump administration canceling $400 million worth of grants and contracts for Columbia University, citing what they call consistent inaction in the face of, quote, persistent harassment of Jewish students. NBC's Aaron Gilchrist is reporting from D.C. What have we heard? Has Columbia responded?
Columbia has responded. We reached out to them for a response to this action that's coming from the Department of Education, the DOJ as well. The university says that it's looking at the announcement at this point. We can show you part of the statement we received from them that says we are reviewing the announcement from the federal agencies and pledge to work with the federal government to restore Columbia's federal funding. We take Columbia's legal obligations seriously and understand how seriously this announcement is and are committed to combating anti-Semitism and ensuring the safety and well-being of our students, faculty, and staff. There was part of the statement from these agencies, the Department of Education and others.
I'm going to interject the way I often do. It just strikes me, for the last 2,000 years, non-Jews have created the stereotype that the way to reach Jews and get their attention is through their pocketbooks. Jews and money. With money, Jews pay attention. Otherwise, Jews, they're just conspiring against us. And I watch this and I see how, no, it's not the Jews. You hit Columbia University with threats and you discuss such things as taking action and acting responsibly in accordance with the law, and you get nowhere. And you hit them with $400 million and suddenly they explain that they're very concerned about civil rights of Jews and they're going to look into protecting Jews. And this is part of our mission in education. You hit them in the pocket, that's where it gets. And it's projecting by them in 2,000 years of anti-Semites that this is something that impacts Jews. It's their own projections. You hit them in the pocket, and then they wake up.
Others that said for too long, Columbia has abandoned its obligation to Jewish students, and today we demonstrate to Columbia and other universities that we will not tolerate their appalling inaction any longer. That's from the new Education Secretary, Linda McMahon. And you might remember that in the days after the Hamas attack on Israel, we did see these pro-Palestinian demonstrations at universities, different universities around the country. Columbia University obviously was one where we saw many demonstrations. And since then, there's been a joint task force stood up in the federal government that was designed to combat anti-Semitism. And there have been investigations of different universities, Columbia at different points in time during the Biden administration, as a matter of fact. And now we have this action coming from the Trump administration, Chris.
Again, the Biden administration, investigations. Trump comes in, action.
Where we've now seen about $400 million in federal grants and contracts that are being canceled by.
It's in every single way that this country has run for the last month and a half. Under the Biden administration, we can stop illegal immigration, but we need the Republicans to join us in legislation. Under the Trump administration, no legislation, executive order, no one's coming in illegally anymore. All the more so on Jewish issues. Under the Trump administration, an end to the embargoing of extremely vital weapons that had been paid for by Israel, but that Biden was embargoing. Under the Trump administration, the embargo stopped. The weapons already are there in Israel. We saw a video last week of the 2,000-pound bombs arriving. Under the Trump administration, America, again, is pulled out of the UN Human Rights Commission, which is a fallacy. The name is a fallacy. It's an anti-Semitic. Under the Trump administration, all funding of UNRWA, the UNRWA, UN Relief and Works Agency, all cut off. Under the Trump administration, you've got Hamas negotiating and letting people out. It's just been, I would almost say it's extraordinary if we hadn't seen the difference between the first Trump administration and then 4 years of the Biden, Kamala Harris, Antony Blinken administration. And thank God they're back in business again.
By this administration, because it doesn't believe that Colombia has done enough to protect Jewish students. And so we'll be listening to see what Colombia says it has done and what it will do in the future in hope.
אוניברסיטת קולומביה היוקרתית.
As we often do on Sundays, we sometimes bring you the Israeli perspective, sharing with you how they were looking at it in Israel when something in America or elsewhere in the world impacts Israel and stuff. So this is Bikvat Hafganot Neged Yisrael, in the footsteps of the anti-Israel demonstrations. Trump Otzer et Hatakziv Universitat Columbia. Trump cuts out from the budget of Columbia. Universitat Columbia, Hayokartit New York, the highly expensive, the very expensive and very highly regarded New York University in New York, Columbia University.
ניו יורק הפכה לסמל המאבק נגד ישראל בשנה.
In the past year has turned into a symbol of university campus demonstrations against Israel.
שעברה. כעת ממשל טראמפ מצמיד.
And now the Trump administration is placing a price tag on these demonstrations that the university has facilitated.
מחיר להפגנות שהאוניברסיטה אפשרה.
We have breaking news. The Trump administration canceling $400 million worth of grants and contracts for Columbia University, citing what they call consistent inaction in the face of, quote, persistent harassment of Jewish students.
שלום קולומביה צייץ טראמפ.
Trump sent out a tweet, and it's titled Shalom in English, SHALOM, Shalom Columbia.
אתמול מהדהד בכך את הפנייה שלו לחמאס. מוקדם יותר השבוע, ממשל טראמפ מבטל 4.
This was in English, and they have just translated it for the benefit of their Israeli viewership channel. I think we're on channel 14, if I'm not mistaken, in Israel. Habayit Halavan, White House. Memshal Trump mevatel $400 million. Trump, Shalom Columbia. Trump administration is canceling, annulling $400 million Universitat Columbia Biglal Kishlona to Columbia University because of its failure lahagen al studentim Yehudim to protect Jewish students.
$400 מיליון לאוניברסיטת קולומביה בגלל כישלונה להגן על סטודנטים יהודים, נאמר בהודעה.
If those are the necessary steps needed to incentivize the school to make a positive change for Jewish students on campus, then that's what needs to be done.
ההפגנות בקולומביה הובילו לאין ספור תלונות. סטודנטים יהודים וישראלים סיפרו על אווירה של הפחדה.
Israeli students in particular, and of course, this is on ICE Channel 14. This is from the public broadcaster like PBS Channel 11. And because they're telecasting to an Israeli viewership in Israel, so they're emphasizing the Israel angle beyond the general anti-Jewish tenor at Columbia. Particularly Israelis have Sipru al-Avira shel Afchada have reported and described an environment of fear.
המוחים מנעו מהם מעבר חופשי בקמפוס. לצד התמיכה בפלסטינים נשמעו גם לעתים אמירות אנטישמיות.
Beyond purely Palestine chants, there have been explicitly anti-Jewish. And of course, we remind ourselves there is no such thing as Palestine. Palestine is the name that the Romans and later the British gave to Israel. Many countries have one name, and then it gets changed. If you've ever seen The King and I, that's the King of Siam. And if you look it up on a map today, it doesn't exist. But it did not disappear. It's still on the ground, only it now has the name Thailand. Today's Thailand was Siam. When you see two babies connected at the head, those are Thai twins. Obviously, they don't use that term anymore. But the point is that there is no Palestine, never was. It is Israel. That was renamed by Brits and renamed by Romans. And once it was liberated by Jews under the Irgun, the Stern, the Lehi, and the Haganah, we renamed it its Jewish name that it had always had when we, the indigenous people, had lived there for 1,000 years and more. Israel. There's no such thing as Palestine. Judea and Samaria, not the West Bank. And there's no such thing as Palestinians. They are Arabs in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Even when people are on Israel's side, when they make a reference to Palestinians or pro-Palestinian or anti-Palestinian, always remember that's a false word. It's like calling them Martians. In fact, that would probably be more accurate. This land is called Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Continue. Here, the guy being interviewed in Morningside Heights is speaking Hebrew because the Israeli reporter based in New York found himself an Israeli student at Columbia to interview and told him, you can talk in Hebrew. He says, Ani lo mefached, ani choshesh lahagia leSituatzia. He says, I'm not afraid here, but I'm concerned where it may reach a situation where, atayodea, it may eventually get into physical conflict.
עימות פיזי. אני כל הזמן נעה בין סבא וסבתא שלי עברו את זה בגרמניה ואני מסרבת לעבור.
For me, again, if she's talking Hebrew, speaking Hebrew, she's Israeli, studying now at Columbia Barnard, and she's saying when I go to school and I go to class, I think of my grandfather and grandmother who survived the Holocaust, and I can't believe that now it's happening to me. Her name is Stav Salama, something.
את זה עכשיו ואני פה ואני מסיקה ואני מדברת לבין לשמור על עצמי כי לא בא לי להיות היהודייה הראשונה שבאמת עשויים לרצוח.
I did not come here to become the first Jew that they murder here.
כאילו אנחנו אימו עליי עם סכין.
Some threatened me with a knife.
פה בתוך הקמפוס.
On campus, in the middle of campus, I was threatened with a knife. The reporter now says that the struggle has now come to Congress, where there have been public hearings that have gotten attention.
המאבק הגיע גם לקונגרס, לשימוע המפורסם שבו נשיאת אוניברסיטת קולומביה התקשתה.
There was a particularly, he says, nationally reported and publicized congressional hearing where the president of Columbia University was called upon to testify about anti-Semitism at her college.
לשכנע שהיא אכן נלחמת נגד אנטישמיות.
On my watch, faculty who make remarks that cross the line.
Now, just for the record, this bastard, a Muslim born in Egypt and now in Britain, on her watch, Columbia became out of control anti-Semitic. She not only never did anything about it, but prominent professors, Arab professors from countries like Kuwait and Qatar, she knew fully damn well what they were teaching in class. Some students had, campus atayodea, they had cell phones, smartphones, and they caught clips of what he was teaching. And when there was a demand that he be fired, he actually got rehired by her. Until finally, the Board of Trustees saw that they were losing multi-million-dollar alumni donations, and they finally kicked her out over the summer.
Line in terms of anti-Semitism, there will be consequences for that.
There were no consequences under her watch.
השימועים הובילו להתפטרות נשיאת קולומביה.
So eventually they fired her.
הרבה השתנה בקולומביה השנה, הפגנות שפרצו.
Much has changed in Colombia the past year. The demonstrations that broke out this past week actually are out of the ordinary. They haven't been for several months.
השבוע בקולג' ברנרד הסמוך היו היוצא מן הכלל, הרוחות במידה רבה נרגעו. אבל לממשל טראמפ זה לא מספיק.
However, for the Trump administration, that's not enough.
דיון על מצב האנטישמיות בקולומביה היה קצרצר, משרד החינוך לא התרשם מהצעדים שננקטו בקמפוס.
The Trump Department of Education was not impressed by steps that Columbia and Barnard have taken, and therefore,
ובחר בענישה חריגה בעוצמתה.
Therefore, they have decided on an extraordinary punishment.
Like stand up for what they believe in without compromising their future? Not really.
הצעד של ממשל טראמפ ימנע מקולומביה מימון למחקרים מדעיים ורפואיים ומלגות לסטודנטים.
Trump has cut off funding for Columbia research and even as far away as medical research and other aspects, plus student finances such as grants, tuition grants.
באוניברסיטה אומרים שהם לומדים את ההחלטה ויגיבו בהתאם. בממשל מבהירים, זו רק ההתחלה.
And the administration has added, this is only the beginning.
נפעל גם נגד אוניברסיטאות נוספות.
And we're also going for other universities.
נתן גוטמן, וושינגטון.
I love the idea that while he's an Israeli, Nathan Gutman, and he's actually Israel-based, but they've got him based in the United States as their reporter. All other American words that start with W, Israel does not have a W. Hebrew does not have a W, a W. It only has the V. So all W words are pronounced as V. But he's always careful when he ends his report. He always says Nathan Gutman or Natan Gutman, Washington. It's just a little thing that I always find cute. Let's do it again.
נפעל גם נגד אוניברסיטאות נוספות. נתן גוטמן, וושינגטון.
Ms. Solomon, I want to be sure I understand your testimony.
Senator John Kennedy is one of our favorites. He's a senator from Louisiana, and not a place that you associate either with great love or hate of Jews, but this guy is one of the most incredibly pro-Israel guys out there, because for him it's a theological thing. Many of the Republicans in Washington are not only pro-Israel for political reasons, many of them are deeply believing Christians who base their Middle East politics on Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, where God says to Abraham, Avinu, our father Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I will curse. And they all are very well aware that from 1290, when England expelled her Jews, she went downhill. In the 1300s, when France expelled her Jews, she went downhill. Spain became the great refuge for Jews, and she became the great world power with Portugal. In 1492, Spain expelled her Jews, and within a century, she became nothing. The Spanish Armada was defeated by the Brits in 1588. 5 years after Spain expelled her Jews in 1492, King Manuel I of Portugal expelled all of his Jews in 1497, and Portugal, which once had been the people who sent Vasco da Gama and Prince Henry the Navigator, those were the great two world powers who actually went around surveying the New World. And both of them died within a century. Today, all they're good for is interesting places to tour because of their ancient sites of what they once were. And so it's gone. When Britain had another chance, and when they turned on Israel after World War I, and they divided Israel into Palestine and the Arab part, that was the end of the British Empire, where it once was said that the sun never sets on British soil. And now the Brits are just one more small thing. And in the same way, as bad as what Hitler was able to accomplish, that country was destroyed after they turned on the Jews. And only after they turned back to being the single most pro-Jewish country in Europe did they start to recover as well. And that's how it is. Those who bless the Jews are blessed. Those who curse the Jews are cursed. Doesn't mean we come out so easily, but they become cursed. And so many of America's Christian politicians are incredibly pro-Israel. And John Kennedy's one of them. And I love it when he's holding hearings. So we continue. He's holding hearings with an anti-Semitic, well, a student who was demonstrating and one of those Bernie Sanders, George Soros type Jews who's a professor opposed to Trump punishing his campuses for allowing the anti-Semitic rallies. We continue.
Did I understand you to testify that anti-Semitism is worse under the Trump administration?
Senator, thank you for your question.
You don't have to thank me. Okay. Your best thanks is to answer.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you that anti-Semitism has been rising, especially since the 2017
but has the Trump
Charlottesville
administration
attack.
caused that? Is that your testimony?
I wouldn't say the Trump administration has caused anti-Semitism. Has there been an increase since Trump has entered office? Yes.
Do you see a causal connection?
First of all, we're Jews, or we're non-Jews who love Jews. That's who's watching. And we know damn well that Trump got anti-Semitism under control in his first term. It blew up under Biden, even with a so-called Jew married to the vice president and another so-called Jew as the Senate majority leader and another so-called Jew as a major donor. All these people, from Soros to Schumer to Doug Emhoff, and even that professor they named to be in charge, an anti-Semitism monitor. So they named her an anti-Semitism monitor, and I guess they had to give her work to do. So they under their watch, anti-Semitism exploded. So she had what to monitor. Here you have a Jewish student testifying on anti-Semitism with testimony that anti-Semitism has gotten worse now that Biden is out and Trump is in. So you pause for a moment, and then you just wait for her to come up with her next line. Because whenever you hear that, the next line is about to follow.
In there?
Yes.
Why?
Trump has highlighted and platformed neo-Nazis and white supremacists.
Okay.
No one's going to hate neo-Nazis and white supremacists more than those of us here right now. But we know, notwithstanding what the Nazis did in the 1940s and what the neo-Nazis might say and want, we know the problem is not neo-Nazis and white supremacists. They're not beating us up on college campuses. They're not fighting Israel. They don't matter. They're insignificant. But this is the left-wing mantra that Trump brought in, the neo-Nazis and that lie about what he said in Charlottesville, when we know that the anti-Semitic, you definitely have to stand against the right wing and against the white supremacists and neo-Nazis. There's no room for tolerance at all for them, not an inch. But we know the problem is the squad, Ocasio, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Chris Van Hollen, the most anti-Semitic United States Senator, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. That's where the anti-Semitism is. But these Jewish leftists, they'll go to the grave with that belief that their problem is 6 neo-Nazis.
Mr. I can't see that far.
Racklin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Congress Daily. Today I'm diving into an intense Senate hearing where Senator John Kennedy grilled witnesses on the rise of anti-Semitism, particularly on college campuses. Trust me, things got heated, so let's break it down.
Racklin.
First,
Mr. Racklin, I understood you to say that the in answer to Senator Durbin's question, the spending reductions, reducing the federal budget would increase anti-Semitism. Isn't that what you said?
No, I did not. I said that the constant threats to cut money to the Office for Civil Rights and the Department of
This is another, we won't have time for all the testimony that I heard as I prepared class. This is another leftist Jew who gets it later on talking about two-state solutions and what Israel's done wrong. But this is a little point on this subject now.
Education prevents the federal government from adequately investigating anti-Semitism and other hate crimes on college campuses.
So you think one way to stop anti-Semitism is to give people more money? Is that
I
right?
think one of the ways is to actually fund people that are actually designed to investigate anti-Semitism on college campuses.
What's there to investigate? We see it.
We see it,
saw
but
it.
just
Did you watch television? Did you see what happened at Columbia?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it was clear to me that the administration at Columbia and most members of the faculty believed passionately in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to hurt Jews. That's what I saw. Isn't that what you saw?
I saw.
Isn't that what you saw?
I saw protesters against the war in Gaza and them using some anti-Semitic slogans and thoughts. I would say, however, that it's hard. I would say,
isn't that
however,
what you're telling me?
that
That's
it's
not what
difficult
you saw.
For
You're
the
telling.
federal
No, don't get
government
off
to
the
invest-
subject
No, I'm
on me
not.
now.
I'm
You're telling me that's
difficult.
not what you saw.
I'm telling you that it is difficult for the federal government to adequately address the issue of anti-Semitism.
Are you telling me
without appropriate
the Columbia administration and the faculty was supportive of the Jewish community?
I think that they are
You
trying
need to
find
stop dipping into your ketamine stash.
into what? Excuse me?
Now, that if we're going to solve this problem, we need to talk about it. And it wasn't just at Columbia. It was at Berkeley. It was at UCLA. It was at Barnard. And Columbia has a history of discriminating against Jewish people. They used to refuse to let Jewish students come to their university. Now, you can try to bubble wrap this, but that's what I saw. If you want to stop a lot of the anti-Semitism, maybe we need to stop teaching kids to be anti-Semitic.
Sir, I would relish that opportunity.
Let me ask you.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here. Let me say that I, too, am pleased that
Josh Hawley is a senator from Missouri. He is another tremendously pro-Israel and is rooted partly in that religious belief.
we're finally holding a hearing after years on this vitally important topic, particularly as these anti-Jewish, anti-Israel protests now erupt again on our college campuses, most of which, all of which, are getting massive amounts of federal funding. Mr. Rockland, is that how I see your name, by the way? Is it Rockland?
Rackland, just
Rackland.
R-A-C-K rather than
Rackland, okay, I got it. All right, I'll see if we...
And the name Rackland is a Jewish name. We even have one of our most beloved members is named Rackland, or actually two of them, husband and wife.
Again, I'll see if I can adhere to that.
Appreciate it.
Let me just ask you, I just want to make sure that I heard you in response. I think it was to Senator Welch. Did you say that you're not in favor of canceling visas for foreign students who commit unlawful acts against Jewish students?
I said at this time, Nexus does not have a position on that, the organization I work for. And then I went on to describe how in the national strategy, it doesn't talk about that, doesn't recommend that. And that was done in consultation with 1,000 leaders across the board and was supported by the ADL, AJC, JFNA, J Street, all of us.
So you don't think
J Street, you caught J Street.
That's not a good idea? I mean, why would we permit a foreign student who's here on a student visa who commits an act of violence, an unlawful act against a Jewish student? Why wouldn't we say, sorry, but if you're going to commit acts of violence against Jewish students, Jewish Americans or foreign Jewish students, whomever, we're going to revoke your visa. I mean, you're going home.
So I think on that issue itself, I'm trying to think now. It's not, when you're talking about acts of violence and you're talking about actually breaking U.S. law towards students, That is criminal. That should be done through the Justice Department. When we're talking about deportation, that's immigration. So if there is a criminal investigation that leads to deportation, I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Well, I'm talking about student visas. They're here on visas. They're here on particular.
Doing that.
Well, sure, but why don't we write into the process a condition of the visa that if you assault a Jewish student on campus, you're out of here. You're gone.
If it was written in the statute and if it was broad enough to be not just be for Jews, but for all people that have experienced discrimination, regardless of who they are, I think that we should look at that. But I think until that is in law, what I'm basing this on is what the current statute says and what currently is being done.
Well, listen, I guess I don't understand the hesitation here at all. To me, this is an easy call, and I've urged the current.
It always occurs to me, I mean, always, I never see Italian Americans taking the lead in criticizing Italy from the United States. I never see Irish Americans getting up there and criticizing Ireland. And I don't see blacks getting up there to testify against blacks, or Arabs, Arab Americans, racing to testify against Arabs. There's some sickness. It's an absolute sickness within the Jewish people. Not that the Jews are, but there's a population within the Jewish people who actually have some kind of sickness. It's partly a mental sickness. And I don't go around just going, oh, you're mentally retarded. But there's a sickness that I am sure stems from all kinds of other traumas that may be tied in with how the parents raised the child, with horror stories about the Holocaust and wanting so much to fit in and not be rejected and ejected and left out, that they somehow have to persuade others in their circles that, don't worry, I don't favor my people. Something that Irish, Italians, blacks, no one else carries this. But they so much want to fit in that, look at me, how liberal, virtue signaling. I'm willing to see expelling people for being violent, but not only for anti-Semitism. The law must be clear that it would be for being against anybody. And it's unbelievable how you get a guy like this sitting and testifying to Christians in the Senate who want to help us out.
Current Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio, to do this. I think he's got the authority to do it. My position is it would send an incredibly clear message. If you come to this country on a student visa, you are here as a guest of the United States for particular purposes. If you assault a Jewish student on campus, you ought to be out of here. And we ought to make it clear to people we are not going to tolerate it. We're not going to tolerate it for any reason. Can I just ask you why I have you here, Mr. Recklin?
Yeah,
I've heard you talk about DEI. I just want to be clear on this. You would agree, wouldn't you, that much of this DEI rhetoric has been weaponized against Jewish students? The DEI dialogue has been weaponized against them. They're called colonizers. They're called imperialists. They're called oppressors. It's the classic intersectionality DEI language. I'll give you some tangible examples. The DEI chair at MIT publicly issued statements calling Israel a genocidal apartheid state. You have the University of Washington's DEI office that sent out an email describing Israel as, once again, an unlawful and oppressive settler colonial apartheid state. The DEI program coordinator at Rutgers said to Jewish students, F you colonizer, F you Zionists. I mean, my point is, isn't it time to speak some truth to power here to these people and to say that Israel is not a colonizer state. It is not an apartheid state. Jewish students are not colonizers, and this kind of rhetoric shouldn't be weaponized against them. You'd agree with that, surely.
I would say that it's wrong to blame Jewish students for the actions of the state of Israel in any way, shape, or form.
And it's wrong to call the state of Israel a colonial apartheid state.
I would say that Israel right now a number of.
You see how hard it is for this. He can't just say it's wrong. He's got to find some kind of carefully circuitous way to answer what he knows that Hawley wants to hear, while at the same time, he himself harbors that sense of Israel as a settler colonialist state. Just an unbelievable thing. And yet we have these people. Obviously, people like Hawley and Kennedy have their minds made up the other way. So thank God these are the guys currently in the majority.
Understand. Thank you very much for your participation. I'll also...
If we knew you were a supporter of Hamas, we would not give you a visa. Because this is a test run. This is a trial run to see, can we go after a head of state from a nation that's not a member? If we can go after them and we can get it done with regards to Israel, they will apply that to the United States at some point. Hamas carried out an atrocious operation. They sent a bunch of savages into Israel with the express and explicit purpose of targeting civilians.
Since October 7th, there's been a disturbing rise in anti-Semitism, pro-terrorist violence in our cities, on college campuses. You and I had the opportunity to write an op-ed together. And in that op-ed, we called on foreign nationals who support Hamas or other terrorist organizations to lose their visas and to be sent back to their home countries. As Secretary of State, of course, you'll be responsible for overseeing the issuance of visas. How will you enforce our laws to ensure that we remove supporters of terrorist groups from our country?
Listen, my view on this is one of common sense. Okay, if you apply for a visa to come into the United States, and in the process of being looked at, it comes to light that you're a supporter of Hamas, we wouldn't let you in. If we knew you were a supporter of Hamas, we would not give you a visa. So now that you got the visa and you're inside the U.S., and now we realize you're a supporter of Hamas, we should remove your visa. If you could not come in because you're a supporter of Hamas, you should not be able to stay on a visa if you're a supporter of Hamas. That's how I view it. And I think that's just an issue of common sense. And we intend to be very forceful about that.
The U.S. State Department is launching an AI-powered catch and revoke program to cancel visas of foreign nationals it identifies as supporting Hamas or other terrorist organizations. The move, reported by Axios Thursday, citing senior State Department officials. Officials say the effort includes reviews of social media accounts appearing to sympathize with designated terrorist groups, but didn't reveal specifics on how AI is employed in the process. The Trump administration is reportedly looking into databases to find any visa holders arrested but allowed to remain in the U.S. during the Biden administration. An official also revealed they're examining media reports of pro-Palestinian protests and Jewish students' lawsuits accusing foreign nationals of engaging in anti-Semitic acts at universities. Officials say the agency is working in concert with the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security to identify foreign nationals they deem as threats to national security. The Catch and Revoke program reportedly examined 100,000 individuals within the student exchange visitor system since October 2023 to determine if any visas were revoked because of a student's arrest or suspensions from school. A State Department source accused the Biden administration of turning a blind eye to the issue, saying 0 visas were revoked under the former president. Free speech advocates are raising concerns the effort violates the First Amendment. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, and pro-Palestinian groups say artificial intelligence isn't a reliable tool to identify whose visas to cancel. A scholar at FIRE says AI cannot be relied on to parse the nuances of expression about complex and contested matters like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee argues it's an alarming erosion of constitutionally protected free speech and privacy rights. For more on this story, you can download the Straight Arrow News app or visit us online at SA.
Right, we turn our attention now to the Middle East, where Hamas is responding to President Trump's latest threats. He called on the militant group to immediately release all remaining hostages being held in Gaza, or, quote, "It's over for you." Our Deborah Potter brings us more from Jerusalem.
The White House has made it clear President Trump has had enough after he issued an ultimatum to Hamas and the entire population of Gaza to release the hostages or face destruction. Pressed on exactly what this means, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said it was unclear but did not rule out joint action with the Israelis. He stressed Hamas must hand over the hostages and leave Gaza. But a senior Hamas official, Mushir al-Masri, said they have no intention of leaving, and while they don't want to rule Gaza after the war, they will not put down their weapons until there is a Palestinian state. He insisted the only way to free the remaining hostages is through negotiations to end the war. The uncertainty has left many hostage families raging against their Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, whom they blame for failed peace talks. Nama Weinberg, whose cousin was killed in captivity, urged President Trump not to cooperate with Netanyahu, saying, "Don't be responsible for the deaths of those who are still alive." In Gaza, despair has replaced the relief over the initial ceasefire. Israel has blocked all aid to the more than 2 million Palestinians living there. Most cannot survive without it. And Witkoff has said he will.
We know very well that they do survive without the so-called aid, that the aid gets taken by Hamas, and they use it primarily to feed their own people, and then they use it to recruit new Hamas members by telling them if you join Hamas, you and your entire families, parents, siblings, grandparents, will get special treatment and the things that we're getting. Israel should never have been giving this stuff. It's about time they finally cut off that so-called aid for a while. We've seen what's going on in other parts of the world, like Sudan, where they were eating dirt. We had video, we saw it on Sunday mornings. And this nonsense and falsehood, CBS, NBC, ABC, are among those who propagate it, with BBC and others of that sort.
Will visit the region next week with stops planned in 4 countries. Back to you.
All right, Deborah, thank you for that.
In the Middle East, we're bringing back our hostages from Gaza.
In his address to Congress Tuesday night, President Donald Trump claimed success in Gaza. Meanwhile, a new proposal from Arab leaders, backed by Egypt, calls for the reconstruction of Gaza under an international trust fund, with the Palestinian Authority taking control, a plan that Israel rejects.
We have learned from Sunday morning programs in the past that the so-called Palestinian Authority, again, there's no such thing as Palestinian, they're the Arabs of Judea and Samaria, are equal terrorists. They're absolutely equal to the terrorists of Gaza. They're a different terrorist group. In the north, in Lebanon, the terrorists are Hezbollah. In Gaza, the terrorists are Hamas. And in Judea and Samaria, the terrorists are al-Fatah. But they're all the same terrorists, same ideologies, and the only reason you hear a little bit less of the terror coming out of Judea and Samaria, or what Mahmoud Abbas wants to call the Palestine Authority, even though there's no such thing as Palestine, is that Israel never gave them the same kind of access to independence that Israel wrongly allowed the Arabs to get in Gaza and in Lebanon.
Have an agreement on phase 2. We demand total demilitarization of Gaza Strip, Hamas and Islamic Jihad out, and give us our hostages. If they agree to that, we can implement tomorrow. We will only have to discuss the ratio for the terrorists that want to get out from our jails.
Gaza residents remain skeptical of any promises made by the region's Arab leaders. Many say they've waited for years for action and that words alone won't bring relief.
We do not rely on the Arab countries at all. For a year and a half, we have been suffering from a siege and the closure of crossings, and no Arab country has moved. We do not want decisions in words, and that's it. We want decisions that will be implemented on the ground.
While negotiations continue, Israel remains focused on securing the release of hostages still held by Hamas. A new report reveals that one hostage, Matan Angrest, is injured, being held in a dark cellar, and deprived of food.
We are ready to extend the framework of the temporary ceasefire, but we have only one condition: our hostages. We want to release hostages. If it is not agreed, it is not agreed.
As Israel rejects the new Arab proposal, the Palestinian Authority and other leaders are pressing forward, pushing for reconstruction plans and more money from international donors, including support for discredited UN programs.
We call for the adoption of the Egyptian-Palestinian and Arab plan for...
This guy, Mahmoud Abbas, is a terrorist. Now he wears a suit and tie because he's smarter than, let's say, that fellow Zelensky from Ukraine, who was not wise enough to walk into the Oval Office with a suit and tie. So it makes an impression. So this guy now wears a suit and tie. He used to dress like Arafat. He was Arafat's number 2. He's a terrorist. He was elected in 2005 to a 4-year term, and he currently is in the 19th year of his 4-year term.
For the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip with the presence of our people in their homeland. Its approval at this summit, the mobilization of international support for it in an international trust fund. It is also necessary to continue working to enhance the survival and support of UNRWA.
With no clear agreement in sight, hostage families desperately wait for news, and Israel prepares to return to fighting if an agreement can't be reached. From Jerusalem, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
ישראל נכנסה למדיניות של דרדור אמצעים מול חמאס ברצועת עזה.
Earlier we saw a clip from Channel 11. This is Channel 14. There are 4 main stations in Hebrew, Channels 11, 12, 13, 14. There are also a few others, ILTV in English, I-24, that's Hebrew and English, but those are the 4 big ones. And 14 is the one with the more, it's more like Fox News, where the other 3, 11, 12, and 13, are extreme leftist, anti-government. They're sort of like 3 MSNBCs. And then, of course, you've got, this is more like Fox. The reporter, Tamir Morag, is reporting that Israel now is taking off the gloves and to pressure Hamas now in the home stretch. They're cutting off food supplies. Now, Hamas has in Gaza, it is reported internationally by non-Israeli sources that they currently have 5 months of food in Gaza. They can go 5 months without any food anyway. They've already got it.
כאשר המטרה היא לגרום לארגון הטרור להתגמש ולקבל את היוזמה שהניח על השולחן המתווך האמריקני סטיב וויטקוף, בישראל מבהירים, זו היוזמה היחידה שמונחת כרגע על הפרק. אנחנו לא מכירים, בניגוד לפרסומים בעיתונות הערבית, יוזמה מצרית להארכת הפסקת האש בשבועיים בתמורה...
Israel is saying, he's reporting that Israel has been rejecting any alternative plans being brought by Arabs, like the Egyptian plan. They're talking with Steve Witkoff, Trump's emissary to the Mideast negotiations. And what you hear from him, that's on the table. And what you hear from al-Sisi of Egypt and from the others, it's just fake news. It's not on the table. And Israel's got no interest in it.
לשחרור 3 חטופים חללים ו3 חטופים חיים. היוזמה של וויטקוף לעומת זאת מדברת על 50 ימים נוספים של הפסקת אש, כאשר ביום הראשון שלה ישחרר...
Witkoff's current proposal on behalf of Trump is an extension of the ceasefire by 50 days. There would be 6 weeks, with half of the remaining hostages released immediately and the other half at the end of 50 days.
חמאס, מחצית מהחטופים הנותרים, הן החיים והן החללים, ואז ייפתח משא ומתן על השלב השני ועל סיום המלחמה שאם יעלה...
And then when the 50 days are up, the extended ceasefire ends, all the hostages have been returned dead and alive, then there can be an opening to start what they call Shlav Bet, the second phase, whose purposes are to get an agreement by which Israel would completely leave Gaza, every last Israeli soldier, and Hamas would completely leave Gaza as well, with no more Hamas presence. It is understood Hamas never, under any circumstances, will agree to that, and Israel will not agree to that. So The second step, the second phase, is dead on arrival.
בהצלחה, יביא לשחרור החטופים כולם. כאמור, ישראל דורשת כי סיום המלחמה יתבצע רק אם חמאס ייכנע ויתפרק מנשקו, לכן הסיכוי להגיע לשם נראה כרגע לא גדול. בכל מקרה, ישראל כאמור מתחילה להוריד את הכפפות בהדרגה, עדיין אין שימוש בלחץ צבאי.
Meanwhile, while the ceasefire is on, Israel is not pressuring Hamas by military aims, but instead is starting to cut off things like cutting off food, cutting off fuel. Today it was announced they're cutting off electricity.
משמעותי, אין חידוש של הלחימה, בוודאי שלא באופן מלא, אבל בשעה טובה ירד השלטר על הסיוע ההומניטרי, והחל מאתמול, במקום כ-600 משאיות שנכנסו לרצועה מדי יום, נכנסות לרצועה בדיוק 0 משאיות, וכך זה יישאר.
And now, rather than sending in 600 truckloads of supplies daily to Gaza, yesterday Israel sent in exactly 0. And thus it shall continue.
גם בהמשך, דובר המועצה לביטחון לאומי בבית הלבן, בריאן ניוז, אומר אמש, אנחנו מגבים את ההחלטה של ישראל לעצור את הסיוע.
And a White House spokesman, Brian News, or something like that, said yesterday that America is backing Israel's decision to completely cut off all assistance and aid. My gosh, what a difference that election has meant.
ההומניטרי, חמאס הוכיח שהוא לא מעוניין בהמשך הפסקת האש. בישראל מעריכים שייקח זמן עד שהצעד הזה יביא איזשהן תוצאות מוחשיות, מאחר שלחמאס יש מאגרים גדולים מאוד של סיוע שנצברו במהלך הפסקת האש, רק במהלך
And we'll move on for time reasons. Here we go.
נמצא כרגע על הפרק.
בכל אופן, אני חייב...
And if it's Sunday on Rabbi Fischer's weekly class of the week, you know some Arab somewhere has driven a car into some crowd in Germany. Last time it was Munich. This time it's Manmnheim. The weekly Arab car attack. And so here we go. Manmnheim, Germany, this past week. Those siren sounds, the police sirens, when we were teenagers, it's the first time we ever heard them. We used to refer to them as the Anne Frank sirens. The first time we ever heard police sirens like that were in the Anne Frank movie. That's the German sirens. Again, carnival celebrations.
Gegen 12:15 Uhr kam es hier im Bereich des Mannheimer Paradeplatzes in der Fußgängerzone zu einem größeren Polizeieinsatz. Aktuell können wir schon bestätigen, dass ein Auto in der Fußgängerzone in eine Menschengruppe gerast ist und hierbei leider eine Person ums Leben kam. Weiterhin wurden mehrere Personen schwer verletzt. Wie viele und wie schwer die Verletzungen sind, dazu können wir aktuell noch keine Angaben machen.
Can you believe it's unclear whether this incident was deliberate or not? I understand they have to say it's always possible some guy had a heart attack, but week after week, a car zooms into a crowd at a festival, and they say we don't know what it was, and then they arrest the guy, and the guy's name is like Mohammed ibn Mohammed. And they still say we don't know what the reason is.
Auch können wir bestätigen, dass eine Person im Rahmen der Ermittlungen, im Rahmen der Fahndung festgenommen wurde. Ob es mehrere Täter gab, dazu können wir keine Angaben machen.
Now overseas, Morgan, where we're following a developing story out of West Germany. Right now, huge operation underway after police say a car drove into a group of pedestrians at high speed. At least one person was killed. Several others were injured. You can see ambulances and officers on the scene. That is now blocked off to the public. Local officials say the driver of the car is in custody, but they are asking people to stay away from the city center as they investigate.
Now for the good news. The good news is that there's now, he was just elected, I believe this past week or two, the new chancellor. And his name is like Fred Merkel or something like from I Love Lucy, but he's the other one. He's not married to Ethel. And Merz, Fred Merz, that's right, just like in I Love Lucy. And he gets up there, and as he starts talking, he's celebrating his electoral victory the night before, and he adds some words about his relationship with Israel and Netanyahu. And he says that we would like to have Netanyahu visit Germany, and we know, as he knows, that the International Criminal Court has arrest warrants for him, that if he steps foot out of Israel, they're calling on the country that he goes to arrest him, take custody, and hand him over to Geneva and the ICC. And obviously, Trump said that's not happening in America. And Trudeau in Canada said he will hand him over to the ICC if he goes, but Trudeau is on his way out, is already out. And Poilievre said that isn't going to happen there. And Kimi Badenoch, that's her name, Kimi Badenoch, in England said it won't happen under her watch. And Keir Starmer is kind of non-committal. And this guy said it won't happen for him either. Let's get this, just a little piece of this.
Wahlergebnis an. Und ich bin tief bewegt und beeindruckt von diesem Wahlergebnis. Herzlichen Dank.
אבל הפרט המעניין יותר בביוגרפיה.
This is Con 11, how Channel 11 reported on his election in Israel, because it gets covered in a different way. No station in America covered his election this way. Everyone else covered it, that there's been a shift to the right in Germany. But Israel, it's a different coverage. The interesting thing the reporter says about the newly elected Fred Merz is that his grandfather was a Nazi during World War II.
שלו זה אולי הסבא הנאצי, יוזף פול סביני, ראש עיר קטנה שהצטרף אחרי 33 למפלגתו
He was the mayor of a small city on the Nazi party.
של הצורר. Having a Nazi
and was a formal Nazi party member.
past in your family, how?
This is the Israeli reporter stationed in Germany, wearing his Con 11 logo, talking with a military analyst, a political analyst in Germany, who I don't think speaks Hebrew, so I think she answers in English.
How did he deal with that?
He denied that he was an actual Nazi because he said that at some point in his career he got into trouble with the Nazi party, which I haven't found to be the case.
סבא או לא סבא, מרץ הוא ידיד מושבע של ישראל, ביקר בה ותמך בה ובחימושה לכל אור.
Nazi or no Nazi grandfather, Merz is a friend of Israel. He has visited Israel, supported Israel, has given weapons, arms to Israel, is again, presently Germany is embargoing weapons that Israel paid for, just as Biden did. And Merz, in his campaigning, said if he got elected, he's going to release the weapons.
אורך המלחמה, ובדיון מיוחד בבונדסטאג 5 ימים לאחר הטבח, היה מאוד ברור בתפיסת העולם שלו.
And 5 days after his election, he addressed the parliament in the Bundestag, and he said, every man, every person of culture, no matter where he comes from, what his beliefs are.
Mensch, egal woher kommt oder an was glaubt. Und vor allem wir Deutsche.
And particularly we as Germans
stehen in diesen Tagen ganz
stand by Israel in these days against the barbarians
Besonders an Ihrer Seite und gegen diese unfassbare Barbarei.
He's a staunch ally of Israel. He's been there twice, and during the last 3 years, I've been with him once, a couple of weeks after October 7th. And he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he met with all kinds of cabinet members and met with kibbutzim survivors. He was on both borders, and so it was really a heartfelt solidarity.
No embargo on Rheinmetall's shells, tank shells.
Definitely no embargo and no captivity of Netanyahu in case he ever got here.
Er hat gestern Abend telefoniert, hat mich angerufen, mir gratuliert.
I spoke with Netanyahu on the telephone. He called me. He congratulated me.
Sie wissen, dass wir uns gut kennen.
You know, we know each other quite well.
Und ich habe ihm auch gesagt,
And I said to him that we absolutely must meet.
Dass wir uns bald sehen sollten nach der Regierungsbildung und für den Fall.
Immediately after I set up my government, and in the event that you intend for us to meet by coming to visit Germany,
Weil dass einen Deutschlandbesuch plant, habe ich ihm auch zugesagt, dass
I also promised him that we will find ways and means
wir Mittel und Wege finden werden, dass Deutschland besucht.
to promise and guarantee him that he can safely visit Germany and return back to Israel and will not face arrest.
Besuchen kann und auch wieder verlassen kann, ohne dass in Deutschland festgenommen worden ist. Ich halte es für eine ganz.
In fact, I think that this is an absurd notion, beyond absurd, l'chilutin. Floyd Mayweather is one of the most, if not the most, successful heavyweight boxer, and actually in 5 different weight classes in the history of professional boxing. That's not my sport. I don't follow it. Never did. I think as a rabbi and as an Orthodox Jew, it's dehumanizing to put 2 human beings in a ring beating the heck out of each other while a crowd cheers for which one gets less beaten up. I think it's just, it's like Roman gladiators, and it goes against everything that I believe Judaism is about. But it entertains just as Roman gladiators did. Floyd Mayweather had maybe the most successful career. He won something like 26 consecutive matches, the all-time career record. He is the only person who ever was the champion in 5 different weight classes. You know, they don't have a heavyweight fighting a lightweight. So you have to weigh in before a boxing match, and you have to be within a certain weight to be in that class. And as he was bulking up over the years, he became a champion in bantamweight, lightweight, featherweight, middleweight, and the most famous is the heavyweight. From out of nowhere, he's long retired now. From out of nowhere, he came out as a meaningful, overwhelming supporter of Israel. And he's very popular in the black community. He's a real hero. And to have him talking in black places and talking about Israel, it's always wonderful. And he was given an award.
I really don't know what to say. First, I just really want to say thank you for the award. When I stood behind Israel, I wasn't looking for an award. I felt I did what was right. And if that's, when you choose your side, you stay on that side. And this is the side that I chose.
I'm going to move on because of time, but that just got tears. Every so often I start with tears. That just got me tears. Here's another one.
I'm going to say it again.
I had a lot. I don't want to say I was crying, but I'm sharing with you as we wind down today's program. Having covered all the intense news, Barnard and Germany and all this stuff, while doing my research of what happened the past week, I came across a few clips that I just had to share. And that was one. And this is another, she's what, Superwoman or whatever. And the way they write the date overseas is first the day, then the month. This is March 5.
My name is Gal.
Start that one again.
I'm going to say it again. My name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. And that's what I'm doing. No way I need it. It really is me standing in front of you today, saying simply that my name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. And we have had enough of Jew hatred. Isn't it crazy that just saying that, just expressing such a simple fact about who I am, feels like a controversial statement? But sadly, this is where we're at today. My name is Gal. I'm a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, an actress. I'm Israeli, and I'm Jewish. I'm gonna say it again. My name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. Isn't it crazy that just saying that, just expressing such a simple fact about who I am, feels like a controversial statement? But sadly, this is where we're at today. I grew up in Rosh Hashanah, in the center of Israel. My mother was the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. On my father's side, I'm the 8th generation to be born in the land of Israel. I'm very proud of both sides of my family, and they show the two sides of Israel. On the one hand, a country that provided a life raft for refugees fleeing the horrors of persecution, pogroms, and the Holocaust. And on the other hand, the historic homeland of the Jewish people, where our roots run deep and where we are an indigenous people. Here's the thing. However much you tried to avoid it before, even if speaking up wasn't really your thing, none of us can ignore the explosion of Jew hatred around the world anymore. And that's what I'm doing. No way I need it. It really is me standing in front of you today, saying simply that my name is Gal and I'm Jewish, and we have had enough of Jew hatred. We will confront anti-Semitism, we will call it out, but we will never let it not only defeat us, but define us, because our love is stronger than their hate.
Don't miss out. Log on to oneindia.com for more updates.
And the Oscar goes to
And on the other hand, I'm gonna Oscars, this happens sometimes.
For updates.
Give it a moment. Okay.
And the Oscar.
I haven't watched the Oscars for years. I used to when I was a kid, even in my early 20s, but they start lecturing with all their causes, all of which I disagree with, and I just stopped. I don't need to listen to them. Let them come on my Sunday program and listen to me. but you read the news and you prepare a class for Sunday morning, what happened the previous week. And one of the Oscars went for documentary to a documentary made by an Arab who lives in Judea, Samaria, and a self-hating Jew from the Bernie Sanders, George Soros, from that school of thought, and real self-hater. And it's just remarkable how much hate they have for the Jewish people and for Israel, not the Arabs. They just hate us because there's a war. But the ones who hate us because they're family, the hate is seething. It's a seething hate. And you'll hear it. The Arab says, thank you for this award. It's about an Arab town in Judea, Samaria, that apparently the Israelis have gone in with the army and have arrested a lot of people and closed places down. You don't get the background like all the terrorists that come out from that place and shoot and kill Jews on the roads until Israel finally does something about it. You only get their half of the story when Israel finally does something about it, at which point they have their Arab filmmaker. Okay, what do you expect? And then they get the self-hating Jew, Israeli, to provide the certification that the Arab is telling the whole story, as the Israeli lets you know, an audience in Beverly Hills or wherever it is that they live that hasn't burned down over the Palisades and Pacific Palisades, and just tells people that don't know left from right and don't know the true story, and feeds that curiosity and that uncertainty with an assurance from the stage that Israel is every bit as bad as you've heard about it. And this is Channel 14 in Israel. In the news, the afternoon or evening after the Oscars were given out. So they are reporting to the people of Israel on Israeli news last night in Hollywood, Oscars, and there was this movie about us, and the two winners, one of them was one of us, and here's what he said to everybody. Starts with the Oscar holech, and the Oscar goes to
no other land.
הם שמחים, הם קורנים, הם הרגע זכו בפרס הנחשב.
They're smiling, their faces are lit up at this wonderful moment that they've merited, winning the highly coveted Oscar, highly coveted in the world of קולנוע, filmmaking.
ביותר של עולם הקולנוע, כסרט התיעודי הטוב ביותר לשנת 2000.
The best documentary in the world for the year 2025.
Thank you to the Academy for the award. It's such a big honor for the four of us.
First, this is the Arab, and he's thanking I think you can make out his English. It's a great honor for us. Thank you to the Academy and for everybody who stands with us in this documentary.
And everybody supported us for this documentary.
אבל מהר מאוד, באסל אדרה ויובל אברהם, יוצרי הסרט אין ארץ אחרת, הפכו את הרגע החגיגי לרגע של שנאה והסתה.
The reporter of Channel 14 is now saying that in this moment of great joy and success, and good for them, they won the Oscar, good for them, they had to turn it Kennedy Medinat Yisrael, may all be mat ha'Oscar. They had to turn it into a platform of Israel hate from the Oscar platform.
כנגד מדינת ישראל, מעל בימת האוסקר.
The same life I'm living now, always fearing settlers' violence, home demolitions, and
you should only know the violence of the settlers, how they've destroyed our homes and uplifted and denied us our basic respect and strength.
Forest bill, displacement.
Even a regime where I am free under.
And this is the Jew, the Israeli.
Civilian law, and Basil is under military laws that destroy his life and he cannot control. על יובל אברהם ודעותיו אפשר.
Yuval Avraham, that's a self-hating Jewish Israeli, and his opinions you can understand them from his screwed up way of looking at life.
להבין מסדר העדיפויות המפוקפק שלו, קודם העזתים ואז החטופים.
Whether he's talking about this is before the Gazans and the hostages. He says, the Israeli, we see one of the other.
The atrocious destruction of Gaza and its people, which must end. The Israeli hostages, brutally taken in the crime of October 7th, which must be freed.
This is what's happening in my village now. Soldiers are everywhere.
כך מתוארת עלילת הסרט על ידי יוצריו.
This is what the defamatory movie says, makes us look like we're sending in the military to destroy the family.
פלסטיני צעיר בשם באסל אדרה מתנגד לפינוי משפחתו על ידי הצבא במספרייתה בדרום הר חברון. הוא מתעד את ההרס ההדרגתי של האזור שבו גדל, שחיילים ישראלים הורסים בו בתים ומפנים.
The movie is about how Israeli soldiers destroy their houses and destroy their neighborhoods and evacuate them from their land.
מפנים את תושביהם, ומתיידד עם יובל, עיתונאי ישראלי שעוזר לו במאבקו.
And his entire story is about his deep friendship with this self-hating Israeli Yuval Avraham. And now we will return, the reporter says, to the hate speech, to the speech of hate.
נשוב לנאום השנאה. שם אל מול צמרת תעשיית הקולנוע האמריקאית, הבינלאומית והעולם כולו.
Here on a platform for all of America and the international as well, Israel gets defamed and libeled as for tihur ethnic ethnic cleansing, the apartheid.
ישראל הואשמה בטיהור אתני ואפרטהייד.
We call on the world to take serious actions to stop the injustice and to stop the ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people.
There is a difference.
By the way, if you heard he said the word Bibel, they cannot pronounce the letter P. The letter P comes out as a B, like pizza or pineapple.
ואפרטהייד.
We call on the world to take serious actions to stop the injustice and to stop the ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people.
There is a different path, a political solution without ethnic supremacy.
על פי דיווחים בהוליווד, השחקנית גל גדות הייתה מיועדת להעניק את הפרס בקטגוריית הסרט התיעודי, לא ברור אם ויתרה על המעמד.
Originally it had been scheduled for Gal Gadot to be the one to present, she's a famous actress, she was Superwoman or whatever, and she was assigned to present the Oscar for the best documentary. And because these guys were perceived as frontrunners, she begged off standing on the podium and giving that award. So she's more than I realized.
מעמד לאחר שהתגלה לה מי הם הזוכים.
It says he's saying that they actually told her who would be winning. And she then said she'd rather not be the president.
Ladies.
Since Conan O'Brien hosted the Oscar program, I share with you this brief video of Conan O'Brien in Israel, training with women of the Israeli Defense Forces.
The point of this exercise is to see if I am fit for the Israeli army. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have quick moves. Would any of that be good in a fight?
A fight with clowns.
I don't know if you heard her English. Would it be good in a fight? A fight with clowns. Let me give you sound. Okay.
For the Israeli army, is that correct?
Yes.
I have quick moves. Would any of that be good in a fight?
A fight with clowns.
What do you mean I'm a mess? You're supposed to build up my confidence, not say I'm a mess. If a battle started now, I would be all day putting on this knee pad. I'll be right there. You got him. Almost there. Hold on. Almost there, and the battle's over. The battle's over.
Oh my God.
Let's be honest, I look like a chef. All right. What do I do first?
Climbing over a wall.
I gotta get over this wall in my first shot.
Yeah.
You know, there is another way. Do you mind moving aside? Look at this.
Yes, very good. Use your leg. Legs. Up, up, up.
Adrian!
Up.
Adrian, get in here! Hold my legs! Adrian! Adrian, yes! Adrian! Adrian! Push! On my ass! Push! Kill that.
No, you don't have.
I don't have?
No. I'm sorry. Come on.
Oh, God. Okay. You're good. Wait, I can't walk!
Yes!
Yeah!
It's amazing!
Finished! Look, I got a cut. I got a cut! Call a helicopter! Look at that!
Being Jewish, this guy's story hits really deep, and it's a reminder of what truly connects us. Watch this.
I've never really considered myself a big Jew. I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in New York City. My mother took me to the Hare Krishna temple on 53rd Street for free lunch every Sundays. I'd probably been exposed to more Hinduism than Judaism by the time I was old enough to be bar mitzvah. But a couple of weeks after October 7th, I was in a pretty dark place. And a friend gave me a quote from the Kutzker Rebbe that I think is just the most beautiful distillation of being Jewish. There is nothing so whole as a broken heart. My Jewish experience began with my grandfather. My grandfather, Alex, wasn't exactly the gold standard of Jewishness either. He wasn't particularly observant, he didn't speak Hebrew, and worst of all, he loved hockey. But every spring, he would have a Seder, and my entire fractious family would gather in his tiny apartment in Washington Place in New York City. I remember my brothers and I fighting over the Afikoman as we reminded ourselves of the bittersweet flavor of being Jewish. I always loved that the whole thing kicked off with an argument. A rabbinical debate about God's fingers and how many plagues were in each hand. And then the questions asked by a child. I know it sounds weird, but I think that's what I love most about being Jewish. That questions and debate are at the heart of Jewish thinking. As if truth and its constant need for calibration were a matter of life and death, because it is. It's what binds us all together. In fact, it's the meaning of the name Israel. To wrestle with God, to question, to wrestle with contradiction, wrestle with the contradiction and the complexity of our lives to arrive at a fuller definition of what it is to be a human being. Not just a Jew, a human being. To push back against ignorance, bigotry, and injustice in order to fix what is broken in our world. That's our core value. Tikkun Olam. Each and every one of us took the time to remind ourselves of the goodness and the light that is inherent in who we are.
There's nothing mean to you.
Adonai